I've done all the big lifts, the rack pulls, the squats, the deadlifts off the floor, all the big lifts known to build a lot of muscle. But over the years, I've coached hundreds of competitors and through myself as well, learning something very important, that the hardest exercises aren't always the most effective. I'm John Jewett, IFBB Pro and founder of J3 University, and today we're going to cover the most overrated lifts in bodybuilding and what to do instead. Because if you want to keep progressing long term, you need to train smarter, not only harder. Now, I know some exercises look totally brutal and cool. There's an emotional tie to just picking some weight off the ground, hearing some metal clank, and letting out a scream when you're lifting, right? The problem becomes is when that lift isn't actually achieving the goal we want as effectively as we could be. Now, the lifts we're covering, they're not bad lifts. They absolutely can build muscle. Before anyone just says, well, Ronnie did it, well, let's just go ahead and say, well, Ronnie did a lot of this, and he still built a lot of tissue, right? But many people use those lifts for the wrong reasons, potentially for their physique, or they might be using to target the muscles that there could be another lift that targets it better. So let's go through some of these big lifts and what might the alternatives be to optimize for a specific muscle group being targeted. Rack pulls get targeted like a go-to posterior chain exercise, but a lot of times it's just training the ego. And by all means, you're gonna get some trap work, some erector work, some glutes, a little bit of quad. It's kind of a lot of stimulus everywhere, and mechanically you're positioned in a way to be able to move a lot of load. The issue though is they're not a direct tension towards a specific muscle group, and also all the muscle groups I just mentioned aren't taken through their full range. It's a lot of partial range of motion for these groups. So if your goal is posterior chain development, what I would swap in place would be a Romanian deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift. Both these allow you to get into longer muscle links for the glutes and the hamstrings, take those through full range of motion. Also, getting in a more bent over position, you can load the erectors more effectively as well. So if you want thick erectors, glutes, hamstrings, those would be more superior than just doing a rack pull. Now, you will be using a lot less load than you use in your rack pull. And I know you might not be getting a lot of trap stimulus that way, but you have to make the argument that the traps or the lats, these are mainly functioning in an isometric contraction during that lift. And we have better lifts if you want to target your lats or your traps that actually take those muscle groups through their full active contractile ranges. Next is the barbell back squat, and for many it's a staple, but also it's not always the best quad builder for everyone. Mechanically, it very well can be more hip dominant, especially if you have a longer femur or you pitch the torso forward more and sit back into the glutes. It doesn't make it a bad lift. However, if the goal is biasing the quad, it might not be the best choice. Now, you can shift this lift into more quad bias if you have a safety squat bar or a transfer bar or using heel elevation. However, for many, that might not be enough. And if that's not enough, what we'd want to move someone into is a hack squat or even a pendulum squat. Both these allow the torso to stay more upright and that knee to travel more so over the toe. Next is our landmine row for lats. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks super cool when you're rowing a bunch of 45 plates between your legs. The problem is that usually you're using a V handle and the range of motion gets really short. Also, you're having to position yourself in a more upright position, and where that upper arm finishes usually ends up being more upper back and trap focused. Now, absolutely, there's a lot of lat sensation that occurs because that elbow stays really tight to the torso and you can finish in that shortened lat position. However, the lats function from a pretty large range. You're having the elbow from overhead all the way down to the hip. So we have some better movements if you want to develop lats in place of this. So for a lat biased row, I would move to something that would be chest supported ideally, with the hands starting more at a 90-degree angle with the torso, and being able to drive that elbow all the way down to the hip, giving a larger range for lat, and also being more braced so you can not have to have your erectors fatigue or using momentum to move it. And then also with that, usually that's where you see the limited range of motion in the V-bar landmine row. If you don't have a good chest supported option, you usually could do just a single arm cable row. The loading won't be that vast to where you shouldn't have any limitations being able to stabilize a single arm row. The V-bar push down for triceps. The grip is very narrow, and so it internally rotates the arm a lot of times, shortens the range of motion, and can a lot of times turn this more into a press than an actual extension. And for those reasons, it can take some of that long head of the tricep out, creating kind of this press motion. If you want a really big tricep builder, I'd want to get the arm overhead. By doing so, you can absolutely put more priority to the long head of the tricep, which is the biggest part of the arm, and of course the medial and lateral heads of the tricep as well. The other benefit too is you're getting a full muscle length of the tricep, which we know tension at longer muscle lengths has probably a little bit more ideal for hypertrophy outcomes. If the overhead position bothers your elbows at all, you absolutely could do something cross body as well. And main thing is just getting that upper arm stabilized, not letting it turn into a press that takes some of the long head out of it. Our next overrated one is upright rows for delts. The upright row can be an awkward one for a lot of people as you start very internally rotated, which the very top of the lift can cause some shoulder impingement to occur. That just starts limiting the range of motion. Also, you'd have some bicep involvement too, which we don't really need that if we're trying to train the side delt primarily. So a better lift to swap in this case would be simply just a cable lateral raise, which has great applications, or even if you have a lateral machine, that would work very well here too. You could go straight out to the side. However, I really like moving in the scapular plane. I've had a lot of higher level guys that are very strong in this movement start running into just a lot of trap involvement going out to the side. Also, we can get better stabilization moving about 15 degrees in front of the body in that scapular plane where the rotator cuff can work a little bit more effectively to stabilize that upper arm. So remember, harder doesn't always mean more effective. If you're putting in the work, but you're not seeing the growth that you expected, a lot of times it's not about more intensity, it's about aligning more with the right exercises for the goal that you're trying to achieve. I know looking hardcore in the gym is really cool for Instagram, but definitely program based off of your needs. And a lot of times bodybuilding is about getting more precise with directing tension to the muscle where you need it, not just getting more sloppy. This is the kind of precision we teach within J3 University for understanding biomechanics, how to apply that within your own programming, and actually build these programs that drive results for you. Subscribe if you found this useful, and drop in the comments below what exercise in bodybuilding do you think is overrated.